deny in order to continue the behavior. Because what does denial allow that abuser to do?
Keep doing it.
Keep doing it without having to answer for it. They just deny they have a problem with it. Now, I want you to understand, the title of this lecture is what? Alcoholism, but this first part is you can use the alcohol rules for any abuse. So what's the number one psychological problem in child abuse? What's the number one psychological problem in gambling? What's the number one psychological problem in cocaine abuse? What's the number one psychological problem in spouse abuse? Elder abuse. Denial is the number one problem in all abusive situations. Why is it number one?
We're not recognizing the problem.
How can you treat someone that denies they have a problem? Right? So until they admit they have a problem, you've got a problem. Okay, definition. A, definition. What's the definition of denial? It is refusal, that goes in the first blank, refusal to accept the reality of a problem. They refuse to accept the reality of it. They say, I'm not an alcoholic. I can quit anytime I want. I'm not a spouse abuser. We just have a really physical relationship. I'm not a child abuser. I'm just a really strict parent and my kids aren't spoiled. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not a gambler. I like games of chance. I'm not a food abuser. I'm a gourmand. You know, they have all these denials about their problem. So how do you treat denial? Letter B, you treat denial by confronting it. You confront it. Confront. You confront it by pointing out to the person the difference between what they say and what they do. So how you confront someone is this. You say, okay, you say you're not an alcoholic. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, you already drank a six-pack. You know what I'm saying? You just confront them. What did I point out? The difference between what she said, which was what? I'm not an alcoholic, and what she did, which was drink a six-pack before 10 o'clock in the morning. You say you're not a spouse abuser, but she has a restraining order against you. You see the confrontation? You say you're not a child abuser, but Protective Services has your children. You see, you say you're not a food abuser, but you're 400 pounds and you're 5'1". Do you see what I'm saying? It's my thyroid. Okay, it's your thyroid. All right. But the point is that they will deny what they have, and you confront it by pointing out the difference between what they say and what they do. That's confrontation. Now, don't get thinking that confrontation is the same as aggression. Don't get those two things mixed up, because aggression attacks the person. And aggression says, you are too an alcoholic, you jerk, you have to admit it. Do you see, what did I attack? What did I attack? Her. You, jerk, admit it. When I confronted, did I attack her?
No.
You what? Say you're not an alcoholic. That's sort of, okay, you say you're not an alcoholic. Did I attack you?
No.
Yeah, I just said, you say you're not an alcoholic, but it's six-pack gone by 10. I mean, did you? You're just saying, hey. Mm-hmm. You're not saying right, wrong, good, bad, horrible, wonderful. You're just saying, hey, this is what it is. This is what I see. You confront. So don't get confrontation mixed up with aggression. Aggression attacks the person. Confrontation attacks the problem. On boards, never attack a person. Just another little note. They have these questions where you're interacting with staff, and they'll say something like, you're dealing with a staff nurse that has more seniority than you on your first job, and they just find fault with everything you do. You understand the scenario? Well, how do you handle that? What do you say? Does anybody know what you say? What's bad to say? And think about pronouns. What pronouns would bad answers have, and what pronouns would good answers have in that scenario? You versus I. So explain that to me. What do you mean? What's the good? What's the bad? The good answer has what in it?
Oh,
I. Bad answer has you. So what don't you say there? Why don't you like me? Why are you so mean? The right answer is, I seem to be having I seem to be frustrating you. I seem to be having a problem, or are seeming to not get along well. You see what I'm saying? Always, when you're dealing with psychodynamic problems with staff, use the I. I'm, not you. Do you understand that? That's a real big thing they are testing a lot now. Okay, same thing with physicians. Physicians, when you question them on the phone, don't say, you wrote the order incorrectly. You say, I'm having a difficult time interpreting exactly what you want. Do you see the difference? Okay. So, when they are in denial, what do? Confront. Deny, confront. Deny, I want you to link that in your mind. Deny, they deny, you confront. They deny, you confront. However, be careful, because there's another place where denial is operative, and that is loss and grief. Don't people go through denial in loss and grief? Have you heard of the stages of death and dying, loss and grief?
Yeah.
What are they?
DABDA.
DABDA. D-A-B-D-A. D-A-B-D-A. Denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, depression, acceptance. Denial, anger, bargaining, there's your DAB. And depression, acceptance, there's your DA. DAB. So, denial is an accepted, healthy, normal first reaction to grief and loss. So what do you do for the denial of loss and grief? Do you confront it? What do? Support it. The word is support. You want to support it. So my point is this. When you get a patient in denial, what do you have to pay attention to get the question correct? Is it loss or abuse? Is it loss or abuse? With abuse, you what? Confront. With loss, you support. I live in Cedarville. It's college of 3,000 in a town of 3,000. So there's one student for every person in the town. But we were basically a farming community with a college, and we have a lot of one-handed men in our town. Why? Baler accidents. The balers amputate their hand. So we have a lot of farm machinery, one-handed baler accident guys. Can you imagine a farmer comes in, his hand gets amputated, and it's all wrapped in a bandage. The next morning, you're taking care of him, and he says, I can't wait to go home and play piano. Problem. He only has one hand, right? So he's in what? What is he refusing to accept? The reality. Is that denial, refusing to accept the reality?
Yes.
So he's in denial. What would you never say to him? You say you're going to play piano, but you only have one hand. That's called what? Confrontation. Now, is confrontation okay for denial? Yes, as long as it's abuse, but not if it's loss. And this guy is lost. So what do? You say, oh, well, how long have you played piano? What's your favorite kind of music? Did you take lessons? What are you allowing that denial to continue? You're supporting it because it serves a function. Is everybody getting the difference? But if you got an alcoholic says, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. I can quit any time I want. He's in what? What's the strategy? Confront. What would be really horrible to do? Support. You wouldn't say, oh, how long you been drinking? What's your favorite beverage? Did you take lessons? Did you ever go to have that, hurricane over there at, MacGyver's bar? You don't support it. So you see where you got two totally different answers for denial. Just pay attention to that. Okay, let's talk about the number 2 psychological problem that abusers have, and that is dependency, codependency. Dependency is when the abuser gets the significant other to do things for them or make decisions for them. In other words, the abuser says, oh, would you call my boss? Would you go do this? Would you do that? And they do it. So who is dependent? The significant other or the abuser? The abuser is dependent. Okay. Now, codependency, on the other hand, is when the significant other derives positive self-esteem from making decisions for or doing things for whom? The abuser. So the abuser says, call my boss, tell him I'm sick. That's an example of what? Dependency. The significant other calls the boss, says he's sick, he can't come to work. Hangs up, says, oh, aren't I a wonderful spouse because I did that, because I don't know anybody else that would do it for that jerk. What are they? How do you know they're codependent? Did they get positive self-esteem? Yeah, what did they say? Oh, aren't I a wonderful spouse because I did that? See, they have this rather pathologic yet symbiotic relationship. You know, one is dependent, the other gets positive self-esteem from meeting those dependency needs, and they just feed off the other. What does the abuser get out of the relationship? What does the abuser get out of the relationship? What's that?
Gets to keep doing.
Yeah, a life without responsibilities. He gets to keep doing whatever he wants, abusing. What does the significant other get out of it?
They feel good. They feel
Positive self-esteem out of it. And then we sit there and we say what to the significant other? Leave him. What are you doing in that relationship? Get out of it. Right? But they can't get out of it because they're what's tied up in that whole thing? Their self-esteem. So, you know, I mean, it's really kind of tough to treat. Well, then how do you treat it? How do you treat it? Well, number one, you set limits and enforce it. You set limits and enforce them. That goes fill in the blank. Set limits and enforce them. In other words, you start teaching the significant other to say the two-letter word no. And then they have to keep doing it. Will you call my boss? No. Would you go buy me some? No. Would you drop me off at the track? No. Would you get me a ham sandwich out of the refrigerator? Well, see, that would be okay. You know, I'm not saying say no to everything. I'm saying say no to those things where you're feeding into everything, all right? But that's not good enough. That alone will not work. Because you must work on the self-esteem of the codependent person, or it will never work. Because as soon as the codependent starts saying no, what will the dependent abuser start saying?
You don't love me anymore.
You don't love me anymore. You're a mean, nasty old whatever. Because you are just horrible. You're horrible. And what's that person playing right at? Self-esteem. They know what side the bread's buttered on. And they go right at that person's self-esteem, and within 10 minutes they got them emotionally manipulated right back into the whole system. So in order for this to work, what does the codependent person have to say? I'm saying no, and I'm sticking to it because I'm a good person because I'm saying no. Oh, you're nasty. I don't care what you say. I'm a good person. And that's how you have to work on it. The thing is, I worked at Lafayette Clinic in Detroit, Michigan for a couple of years, and it's mostly alcohol rehab and seizure. And we found that when we treated codependency, dependency successfully, when we treated this problem, guess what we lost? The relationship. You know, the codependent person would go, I'm a good person, I don't need you, and why am I here? And they'd leave. So, you know, we'd solve the problem but lose the relationship. Real common. Okay, turn the page. Let's talk about manipulation. What's the definition of manipulation? It's when the abuser gets the significant other to do things for him or her that are not in the best interest of the significant other. The nature of the act is dangerous or harmful. What goes in the blanks is interest and harmful. interest, and harmful. So how is this like dependency? How is manipulation like dependency? Yeah, in both situations, the abuser is getting the other person to do something for them. Then how in the world do you tell the difference between those two things? What's that? Well, neutral versus negative. Look at what they're being asked to do. If what the significant other is being asked to do is neutral, no big deal, no harm done, no harm, no foul, it's simply dependency, codependency. If what the significant other is being asked to do is inherently harmful or dangerous to the significant other, that person is being manipulated. So let me give you two examples, and you tell me which one is denial, which one is dependency, and which one is manipulation. A 49-year-old alcoholic gets her 17-year-old daughter to go to the store and buy alcohol for her. That is what? Why?
This is an alcoholic.
Well, no, because
Getting hurt.
because a 17-year-old going and buying alcohol is illegal in the state of Ohio. So it is illegal. So she's being asked to do something illegal. Now, what about this? A 49-year-old alcoholic asks her 50-year-old husband to go to the store and buy alcohol for her. Of what is that an example? Why is it dependent? It's the same thing, buying alcohol.
She's old enough. She knows he has a problem, and she's old enough.
I mean, well, and she's of age. There's nothing. How harmful is it for a 50-year-old man to go to a store and buy alcohol? Any harm? No. So that's simply dependency. But when the 17-year-old goes to buy alcohol, that's illegal. There's harm. That's manipulation. Let me give you an example. Tuesday evening, or last Friday evening. Remember Tuesday, last Friday, around here? Okay. Your neighbor calls you. No, your brother calls, sister-in-law calls you and says, "Would you pick up little Billy from basketball practice at school so he can spend the night at your house because of the snow?" Now you have a four-wheel drive what? Hummer, Jeep. What's best in the snow? Not ice, but snow. What? Four-wheel drive, some big. Okay, you got a big earth mover, four-wheel drive earth mover. Okay, and you live 3 blocks from the school, and you say, "Okay, sister-in-law, I'll do that." You are being what? She is being dependent on you. You're being codependent because you'll say, "Oh, aren't I a wonderful brother-in-law for doing this," right? What if your sister-in-law calls you? She's got the four-wheel drive all-terrain vehicle, and she lives 3 blocks from school. She asks you to pick up her son and take him to your house. You have a Kia Sophia with ball tires, and it starts every other time. It leaks oil, got no heat. Do you see what I'm saying? And you live 20 miles from the school. And what's happening here? You're being what? Manipulated, because it is inherently dangerous for you to get in that car and go that distance when she could do it easily, safer, better herself. Whereas in the first one, it was safer and better for you to do it than... Do you see what I'm saying? Dependency and manipulation are similar. It's just the only way you tell the difference is one, you're being asked to do something which is bad for you, that's manipulation, versus something that's neutral, that's dependency, codependency. Can you tell the difference now? Okay, good. All right. How do you treat manipulation? You set limits and enforce them. So you start saying what 2-letter word? No. Number 2, it is easier to treat than dependency, codependency, because nobody likes being manipulated. I have never heard a person say, oh, I must be a wonderful person for being manipulated. Do you know what they all say? I must be an idiot for falling for that. Do you hear any positive self-esteem going on? No. So there's no positive self-esteem issue going on with manipulation like there is with dependency, codependency. You see why it's easier to treat? Okay, let's just summarize. How many patients do you have with denial? If Bob is in denial, how many patients do you have? 1, 2, or 3, or 4? Bob is in denial, how many patients do you have? 1, 2, or 3, or 4? 1. Bob is dependent. How many patients do you have? 1 or 2? 2, because you got to get the codependent. Bob is a manipulator. How many patients do you have? 1 or 2? 1. Do you see what I'm saying? Because you don't have to do anything with the person who's being manipulated because there's no self-esteem issues. So with denial, you got 1 patient. With dependency, you have 2 patients. With manipulation, you have 1 patient. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, let's talk now about things specific to alcoholism. Let's talk about Wernicke's or Korsakoff's. Wernicke's and Korsakoff's. Typically, they are separate, but boards often lumps them together. Wernicke's is an encephalopathy and Korsakoff's is a psychosis, but they tend to go together. You find them in the same patient. So Wernicke-Korsakoff's is number 1, psychosis induced by vitamin B1 or thiamine deficiency. This is a scenario where you lose touch with reality. You go insane because you don't have B1.
What's induced?
Psychosis, which means insanity or loss of touch with reality. These are psychotic people, not just a little bit emotionally disturbed. These are psychotics. The primary symptom, number 2, is amnesia with confabulation. Amnesia with confabulation. Amnesia means memory loss. Confabulation means making up stories. Why do they make up stories?
I don't know.
Because they forgot. Well, in that case, then I'm psychotic. Because I often make up details that I have forgotten. Right? So then why are they psychotic and me not? Fair question. Why? So everybody that forgets something and makes up a story to fill in what they forgot is insane, psychotic. True or false? False. Well then, explain to me the difference. Why? Why are these poor people called in psychotic and we're not? Because they believe it. See, when I fill in details because I forgot, I know it's not really true. But they really believe it. The lie is just as real as reality. And their memory loss is not, oh, I forgot what I did last night when I was drunk. No, it is, what happened to the 90s? They don't remember anything in the whole 1990s. They'll lose entire decades of their memory. So what will they do? Make up stories as to what they were doing during the 90s. I had a guy that, with Wernicke's, he was Ronald Reagan's national security advisor during the 80s. The guy had never made it past 3rd grade. Now, whatever you thought of Reagan, he wasn't that bad that he would have had a 3rd grader running the national security. You know what I'm saying? So he definitely was never Reagan's national security advisor. He thought he was. He could tell you meetings, dates, times, people. He had this whole psychotic reality built around Ronald Reagan's terms in office. And he believed it. He literally believed it. He believed it as that was as real as anything that was happening right then and right there. So, how do you deal with that? How do you think you deal with that? You got a Wernicke's Korsakoff's guy who thinks he is Obama's Secretary of Defense. And so he's got to get up and go to a cabinet meeting right now. How do you deal with that? What would probably be a bad way to deal with that? What's that? Okay, we don't usually agree or disagree.
Confrontation.
We don't confront. Why?
Because they'll get angry.
Why?
Because you're telling them that what they're saying isn't true and they believe it.
Right. And it's due to brain damage. So are they ever going to learn what's true and what's real?
No.
So is this permanent or not? Typically permanent. So you don't present reality because they can't learn it. So what do you do? See, this is the questions they ask you. They give you a person with Wernicke's, and they say that Wernicke says he's going to a presidential cabinet meeting at 8 o'clock this morning. How do you deal with that?
Distract.
Okay, distract is not as good a word as redirect. Redirect is a really good word. And that means to take what he's all about that you can't do and rechannel it into something he can do. So can he go to Barack Obama's cabinet meeting this morning? No. So what you do is you say something like this. Well, why don't you then get a shower? When you're done, we'll go watch CNN to see what the news of the day is in Washington, D.C. You see that? Is he going to do that? Probably, because do you see what I'm saying? And you don't get into a fight with him about, no, you're Joe the milkman, you're not Ronald Reagan's national security advisor. Do you see what I'm saying? Because that's fruitless and pointless. So when somebody has Wernicke's and Korsakoffs and they talk crazy, what do? Redirect. You don't present what? Reality. Because presenting reality is for those people that you think that can learn it, and these people can't learn it. So redirecting them is the way. Now let's talk about characteristics. Number one, it is preventable. You never have to get this in the first place. How can you prevent getting this in the first place? Take vitamin B1. But by the way, vitamin B1 is a coenzyme necessary for the metabolism of alcohol. You don't have to know this. It's necessary for the metabolism of alcohol. So if you don't have B1, you won't metabolize alcohol. It won't go into Krebs cycle. Does that sound familiar? It won't get burned up for energy. So what will it do? Accumulate. And where will it go? Brain, and it will destroy brain cells. That's how this happens. So all they need to protect the brain is to take vitamin B1, and then any alcohol they drink will be what? Metabolized. So they don't have to stop drinking. All they have to do is take their one a day with their vodka in the morning and they'll be fine. They will be perfectly fine. You get a lot of good compliance with this one. Okay? B, it is arrestable, which means you can stop it from getting worse. How can you stop it from getting worse? Take B1. Stop drinking? Is stop drinking necessary? No. C, it is irreversible. Now, not everybody has irreversible, but it's about 70% irreversible, so you always say irreversible. Do you understand on boards you always answer with the majority? If something is majority of the time fatal, you say it's what? Fatal. You don't say, well, 5% of the time it's not fatal, so I'm saying it's not fatal. No, don't do that. Go with the majority. So it is irreversible. So it's preventable, it's arrestable, and it's irreversible. 2 good news, 1 bad news. All right, let's turn the page and talk about some drugs that have to do with alcohol. Antabuse or Revia. Antabuse or Revia. Does anybody know the generic name for these drugs? Disulfiram. Disulfiram. Number 1, it is aversion therapy. Aversion therapy. It's a form of aversion therapy. Now, what aversion therapy is this. The word aversion means a really strong hatred for something. A gut hatred for something. What we want alcoholics to develop is a gut hatred for alcohol. That's what we're trying to do here. Well, how do we do it? Well, we give them this drug. Now, just, you don't have to write this down, but just sort of listen to this for a second.